Hello guys, this is Mr. Sharp. Ms. Capuli's here with me for this Reader's Workshop lesson. I don't know if we'll need to talk at all, but just in case you know what's happening. Today our lesson is on Spotlight Thinking, New Thinking. So when we read nonfiction, there's a lot of facts, and we don't need to remember every single fact. So this lesson and the next several lessons will be about identifying the important facts and writing those down. And as you can see, our charts have 3 columns. So facts are those important facts that I wanted to write down. The questions will be questions about those facts, and the response can be any sort of internal conversation, inner conversation that you have regarding your question and the facts. So maybe it's another question. Maybe it's, I never knew that, or this reminds me of, something like that. Okay, so we're going to look at the carbon cycle reading that you guys had a couple of nights ago. And when I read, I'm not going to just stop at the first fact I see and jump back to my notes to type something down. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs, or maybe even a section, like before this little graphic. Then I'm going to stop and think about, okay, what were the important facts, and I'll try to make my notes from there. That's what you should do when you read for this assignment. So let's take a look. One of the most important elements to life on planet Earth is carbon. All living organisms have carbon as the basis for life. It is so important that animals are often called carbon-based life forms. How much carbon is in the human body? Carbon makes up about 18% of the human body. So if you weigh 100 pounds, your body contains around 18 pounds of carbon. The carbon cycle. Some carbon atoms are constantly moving around. This is because carbon atoms are used by all sorts of processes on our planet. Some of these processes put carbon into the atmosphere, air, and some take it out. The carbon cycle is often very tied with the oxygen cycle. So I'm going to pause there because I'm, 3 short paragraphs in. And this bit about the human body is pretty interesting and it's pretty simple. But when I think about it, it's probably not the most important thing that I read. Now this part down here about the carbon cycle, it's a little bit complicated. I'm not quite ready to write down a fact about that yet. But I do definitely understand something about all life on Earth has carbon. We are carbon-based life forms. So let's do something with that. On number 1, all living things are based on carbon. Maybe I should add on Earth. And the question that came to my mind is, whose recycled carbon do I have in my body? Because if we're all just made of carbon, then, dead things die or we eat them, and then that carbon goes into me. And it's a cycle, so it keeps going around and around. And my response was, in some science fiction, aliens are based on silicon. And I wonder how their lives must be different. Because if you're not based on carbon, if you're based on silicon, you have a whole different way of living. Yeah, so let's go back to reading. The next thing I did is I clicked on my infographic to learn a little bit more about that carbon cycle. And I see we have photosynthesis interacting with plants, and this soil carbon doing something that's involved with the plants. We've got microbial respiration and decomposition. Let's make it a little bigger. Which is, stuff breaking down, like tiny germs breaking down dead stuff that releases some carbon. Yeah, decay. Human emissions up here, fossil carbon, so that's our oil. That's dead dinosaurs and buried trees and stuff that's super old. And then I see that the ocean is doing something with carbon, photosynthesis, so there's plants in the ocean. Something with air and sea have a gas exchange. And then deep down, something's going on with carbon. So you can react to infographics too. Let's see, I think I have to hit back. Yeah. I reacted to that one by saying, deep in the earth is fossil carbon. My question there is, will I end up as carbon, maybe we'll say fossilized carbon, deep in the earth, because, you know, that's what happened to the dinosaurs. And then my response was, weird, because we have that fossilized carbon so far deep down. Look how deep it is under everything. So that's weird. Dead stuff just sinks and gets covered up by new things. And I don't know exactly how that works, but it's got to be something with, you know, animals moving around, moving dirt, maybe wind blows stuff in, new life forms are growing on top of it, new plants, and stuff gets pushed down. All right, let's look back at our article. How are we on time? 6 minutes, okay. Taking carbon out of the atmosphere. Nature is constantly taking carbon out of the atmosphere. These processes are sometimes called carbon sinks. Photosynthesis. Plants use photosynthesis to make energy and grow. They take carbon dioxide, CO2, sunlight, and water and turn it into oxygen and sugar. Large areas of plants, like the rainforest, help to remove lots of carbon from the atmosphere. The ocean. Ocean water does a lot to remove excess carbon from the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide in the air reacts with the seawater to make carbonic acid in the ocean. However, if there is too much carbonic acid, it can cause acid rain, which is not good. Some carbon dioxide in the ocean is good, as the carbon combines with calcium to form calcium carbonate, which is used by sea organisms to make their shells. I mean, that's pretty cool. These cells will eventually become sedimentary rock like limestone. Okay. Moving carbon into the atmosphere. At the same time that some processes of nature are removing carbon from the air, other processes are adding more carbon to the air. These processes are called sources. Respiration, that's breathing. Every time you breathe, you turn oxygen into carbon dioxide. This is true of every animal on Earth. Decay. When plants and animals die, they decay. When this happens, the carbon in their body will either be released into the atmosphere or stored in the ground as fossil fuels. Combustion, burning. When plants, trees, or fossil fuels are burned, carbon is released into the atmosphere. So I read all that so I could read enough to decide what I thought was the important fact. And we have stuff about coming out and going into the atmosphere, so I thought carbon gets taken out of the atmosphere by some things and put there by some things. I thought that was the most interesting fact and probably the thing easiest to remember. My question is, what is the relationship between the sunlight and photosynthesis and carbon? Maybe you know, Ms. Capulli, does sunlight turn into carbon, or is it just like an energy source?
It's an energy source.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then my response is, one way to think about life is we are all carbon just getting reorganized. Yeah. Alright, let's find one more fact, guys. The carbon cycle balance. Carbon is essential for life, and nature does a great job of balancing the carbon available through the carbon cycle. Carbon is needed in the atmosphere as well because it helps to keep Earth warm. Without it, we'd all be freezing. How man alters the carbon cycle. And I should note here, when these kinds of things say man, they mean people or humans. Although nature does a great job in balancing carbon through the carbon cycle, when man gets involved, we can upset the balance. By burning fossil fuels like coal, gas, and oil, lots of carbon is released into the air. Also, cutting down trees for development reduces the amount of plants available to remove carbon from the air. Alright, so to me it's real obvious. The most interesting thing about that is people just upsetting the balance. So my fact was humans can upset the carbon balance. Let's make our chart even. My question is, what made us so successful at not dying that we can upset that balance? Because, you know, we're just part of carbon too. Why do we get to be so successful that we can mess up the whole thing? My response is, sometimes I think life is like a video game where people put all their skill points into intelligence. and we're just too smart, so we're living too long. Okay, guys, so that's our lesson for today. Your job is you will get your Language Arts notebook. You'll make a chart like this with 3 columns for facts, questions, and a response. And let's have 2 in each column to turn in today. Thanks, guys.